The night was quiet in the deep space relay station, a lonely metal outpost floating between dead stars. Inside the small control room, only the soft hum of machines filled the air. Lieutenant Kara Miles sat in front of the flickering holoscreen, sipping cold coffee, her eyes heavy from another long watch. She had been stationed here for 3 years and nothing exciting had ever happened. Just empty signals, static, and the silence of space. But tonight something changed. The console beeped once, faintly at first, then again louder. Kara frowned and leaned forward, adjusting the frequency. A weak pulse appeared on the scanner. An old human frequency, long abandoned. Her hands trembled as she brought it into focus. The signal was ancient, full of interference, but it carried rhythm. Pattern, purpose. She started recording, her heart beating fast. When the static cleared for a second, a voice whispered through the noise. It was human, tired, but strong. "This is the colony of Eidolon Prime," the voice said. "They are upon us. We will not beg for rescue." Then there was silence. Kara froze, staring at the screen, unable to breathe. The transmission wasn't a distress call, it was a message, a vow. "We don't beg for rescue. We promise retribution," the voice repeated. Just before the signal faded into static again, she replayed it again and again, every word shaking her to the core. Eidolon Prime. That name was a ghost in human history. A colony destroyed 200 years ago by the Ziran Dominion. No one had survived, or so the archives said, but this message, sent seconds before the planet's death, had somehow crossed centuries to reach her. A whisper from the grave calling to humanity once more. Kara activated the priority channel to command, her voice trembling. "Central Command. This is Relay Station Delta 7. I've picked up a Class 1 human transmission on a pre-expansion code. It's authentic," static answered first. Then the calm voice of a communications officer. "Repeat that, Lieutenant. Did you say a Class 1? "Yes, sir," she said. "Origin confirmed. Eidolon Prime." Within minutes, the signal reached the Terran flagship Erebus, orbiting near Titan Station. Captain Mira Hayes stood silent as the old message played before her crew. She was known for her cold precision, a woman carved from steel and duty. But as the voice of a dying colonist echoed through the bridge, even her eyes darkened with emotion. Her first officer, Commander Lian Ro, spoke softly. "It's impossible. That colony's been dust for centuries." Mira didn't answer, her gaze fixed on the flickering hologram of the transmission. When it ended, she whispered, "They never begged for help." She turned slowly toward the viewport, where the cold stars stretched endlessly. "They promised retribution," she said. Almost to herself, the crew exchanged uneasy glances. Everyone knew the story of Eidolon Prime, humanity's greatest loss during the Ziran Wars. A peaceful world burned without warning, its people erased. The government at the time had been too weak, too divided to respond, and now, after generations of peace, the ghosts of Eidolon had returned. "Send the signal to Earth Defense Council," Mira ordered, her voice calm but sharp as a blade. Her crew hesitated. "Captain, are you sure? This could start something we can't control." She looked at them, her expression unshaken. "Something was started 200 years ago," she said. "We just forgot to finish it." The Erebus went dark, shifting into stealth mode. Around her, the fleet rested, ships built for defense, not war. But old weapons slept deep within their cores, forgotten by politics but not by history. Mira opened the ancient war directory, long sealed by the Terran Council. Her hand hovered over the red-coded file marked Aegis Protocol. The ship's AI hesitated. "Captain Hayes, activation requires authorization from the Council." Mira smiled faintly. "Then consider this a preemptive awakening." A soft hum filled the ship as the old systems flickered to life. Lines of forgotten code scrolled across the holoscreen. One by one, the engines of Erebus roared with new light. Her crew stared in awe as the black armor panels unfolded, revealing hidden weapon arrays. "This isn't a rescue mission," Mira said quietly. "This is remembrance." Outside, the void stirred. The relay stations repeated the signal across the human network. Every colony, every ship, every world that once called itself human received the same ancient message. The words carried more power than any command. It was not a cry for help. It was a reminder of who they were. The Deathworlders, the survivors, the species that refused to kneel. Kara Miles watched from her lonely post as hundreds of ships began aligning toward the same direction. The ruins of Eidolon Prime. She smiled faintly, whispering to herself, They heard you. The stars shimmered, and for the first time in centuries, the galaxy felt the pulse of human wrath returning. Far away on a dying Zaran world, an admiral woke from uneasy dreams. His sensors picked up a familiar but terrifying code. Human. Pure and old, he stood slowly, his breath heavy. They found it, he said, trembling. The signal of promise. And somewhere in the endless dark, Captain Mira Hayes whispered into the void, "Eidolon, we heard you." Her eyes burned with the reflection of her fleet's awakening. This time, the promise will be kept. The great city of New Geneva glowed beneath the silver haze of Earth's defense shield. Inside the massive dome of the Terran High Council, leaders from every human world gathered in a circle of light. Holographic banners shimmered with symbols of peace, unity, and law. But beneath those bright colors lay fear, confusion, and a rising anger that words could no longer hide. At the center stood Captain Mira Hayes, calm but defiant. The ancient signal from Eidolon Prime echoed again through the chamber. Every council member watched the flickering projection of that final message. "We don't beg for rescue. We promise retribution." The silence afterward was heavy. Almost sacred, Counselor Ren Talos, head of foreign affairs, broke it first. "This message is 200 years old," he said sharply. "It is not a reason to start a war." Mira looked at him, her tone controlled but firm. "With respect, Counselor, that war never ended. We just stopped fighting it," he glared. "And now you wish to drag humanity back into fire." "No," she said, her voice steady. "I want to remind them who we are." Whispers filled the room as other counselors argued among themselves. Some feared the Zaran Dominion still held overwhelming power. Others felt humanity's strength had grown beyond anything the aliens imagined. But no one could deny the weight of the signal. A forgotten promise had awakened something ancient, something dangerous. Counselor Naira Voss, an older woman with gray hair and eyes that had seen the worst of past wars, finally spoke. "When I was a child," she said softly, "my grandmother told me about Eidolon Prime, how families vanished without a trace." She turned toward the others, her voice trembling with conviction. "Maybe this isn't about vengeance. Maybe it's about closure." For a moment, even the walls seemed to breathe with her words. Mira placed a small data crystal on the central podium. "This contains the full signal path, confirmed through 3 systems," she said. "It was not random, not accidental. The message was aimed at us. Someone wanted us to remember." She paused, her gaze moving slowly around the table. "The people of Eidolon died alone, believing one day we would return." Her words echoed deep into the chamber like a heartbeat. But Counselor Wren slammed his hand on the table, his voice sharp with anger. "And what happens when your fleets burn the stars again, Captain? Do you think vengeance will rebuild what was lost?" Mira met his gaze. "No," she said quietly. "But it will make sure no one dares to erase us again." The counselors argued louder now, voices overlapping, orders and protests filling the air. Outside the dome, thunder rumbled through the atmosphere as orbital storms rolled over the planet's surface. In the shadows near the back of the hall, Admiral Rowan Dre, Mira's old mentor, watched silently. He had trained her when she was young, and he recognized that same fire in her eyes now. When the council finally recessed, he approached her. "They will not approve a retaliation," he said. "I know," Mira replied. "That's why I'm not asking." Dre studied her face. "You plan to act without sanction?" Mira nodded slowly. "I have volunteers from the outer colonies. They're ready to move." "The Oath Keepers," Dre murmured, recognizing the old resistance name whispered among soldiers. He sighed deeply. "You realize if you do this, you'll be branded a traitor." She smiled faintly. "If keeping a promise makes me a traitor, then so be it." That night, under the pale glow of Earth's shield, the Erebus and 5 escort ships quietly detached from the orbital docks. Their transponders switched to civilian mode. Their drives silent, no alarms sounded, no orders were given. Only the faint hum of engines broke the stillness as the fleet slipped into the darkness of space. Meanwhile, deep within the Council's data chambers, a young technician noticed the missing vessels. He hesitated before reporting, but an unseen hand placed a message on his console. "Let them go," it said, marked with the personal code of Admiral Dre. He stared for a moment, then obeyed, deleting the alert from the system logs. Hours later, the Council reconvened, unaware that Mira and her crew were already beyond the communication range. Ren Talos presented a motion to lock down all military operations. But as he spoke, the central screen flickered unexpectedly. The Eidolon signal replayed again, stronger, clearer, resonating through the chamber walls. It wasn't coming from the archives this time. It was broadcasting live from an unknown source. Counselor Voss stood, eyes wide. "She's sending it again," she whispered. Across the galaxy, human ships began receiving the same pulse. Freighters, patrols, even mining drones, all recognized the ancient code. For the first time in centuries, every human world heard the same message. A single voice from the past, awakening the unity they had forgotten. In the void beyond Mars, Captain Mira Hayes sat in her command chair, watching the stars align on her nav map. Her fleet formed a silent formation, a spear pointing toward the ruins of Eidolon Prime. She looked at the hollow of Earth one last time, its blue glow fading behind them. "We are not fleeing peace," she said to her crew. "We are reclaiming honor." Her voice was calm, but full of quiet power. "Prepare the jump," she ordered. As the engines flared, the Erebus vanished into hyperspace, leaving behind a world divided by fear and moving toward one united by a promise. The stars stretched into silver lines, and somewhere deep inside the ship, the ancient words echoed again. "We don't beg for rescue. We promise retribution." The void swallowed light as the Erebus fleet emerged from hyperspace, engines glowing like distant embers against a dead world. Before them drifted Eidolon Prime, a planet of silence, half-shattered, wrapped in clouds of ash and frozen fire. No green, no water, no cities. Only the scars of an old war that refused to fade. Captain Mira Hayes stood at the observation deck, her reflection merging with the broken world below. "Scan for life," she ordered softly, her voice calm but heavy with something deeper, grief and fury bound together. Lieutenant Kara Miles worked quickly, her fingers tracing glowing controls. "Negative life signs, Captain. Surface temperature below survival range, radiation levels unstable." Mira nodded slowly, her eyes fixed on the horizon. "Then we'll go where the dead still speak." The landing crafts descended through dust storms that howled like ghosts. Flashes of lightning cut through the haze, revealing skeletons of fallen towers. Once, Eidolon Prime had been called the jewel of humanity, its oceans blue, its cities shining white. Now it was nothing but bones, glass, and echoes of screams carried by the wind. As Mira stepped onto the cracked ground, her boots sank into layers of blackened soil. Around her, the team moved cautiously, their suits glowing faint blue in the gloom. They found melted metal, children's toys fused with rubble, old flags buried in the dust. Every object whispered stories that the stars had forgotten. Then Kara's scanner beeped. "Captain, I'm picking up faint energy readings below the surface." Mira's eyes sharpened. "Location: 200 meters beneath us, deep structure, possibly a vault." "Get us in," Mira said, her voice like steel. The ground opened with a deep groan as the excavation drones cut through the rock. Hidden beneath centuries of ruin, they uncovered a massive metal door, sealed by ancient Terran technology. On its surface were words almost erased by time. "We die free, so others may rise." The crew fell silent, staring at the inscription. Mira ran her hand over the letters, feeling the cold metal vibrate faintly under her touch. "This was no bunker," she whispered. "It was a message." The vault door opened slowly, dust swirling like mist. Inside, holographic projectors blinked weakly to life, replaying fragments of the colony's final hours. They saw men and women rushing through corridors, children being evacuated, soldiers shouting over broken comms. Then the image of a woman appeared, a scientist wearing the insignia of Eidolon Command. Her voice cracked with static but remained strong. "If you're hearing this, humanity, we failed to survive but not to warn. They came for us, not out of fear but arrogance. They believed they could erase us." Her hologram flickered. "Remember us not for how we died but for what we promised." The last words froze the air. "Retribution," she said, her eyes looking straight through time. The hologram ended, and silence fell once more. Kara exhaled slowly. Captain. She knew someone would come. Mira nodded, her jaw tightening. And we just did. She turned to the engineers. Recover every data core, every log, every signal trace. This world's voice won't be lost again. Hours passed as drones unearthed more relics. Old weapon schematics, population archives, even an incomplete war AI memory crystal. When the system booted, it identified itself as Project Aegis, the same code name Mira had seen in the Erebus archives. The AI's fragmented voice echoed weakly. Defense network. Deactivated. Awaiting command authorization. Protocol. Eidolon. Mira stepped closer. Aegis, this is Captain Mira Hayes of the United Terran Command. The AI paused, then answered slowly. Voice pattern accepted. Lineage verified. Eidolon's bloodline continues. Everyone froze, exchanging stunned looks. Kara whispered, Bloodline? How could it know that? Mira didn't answer, but inside her chest her heart pounded. Her ancestors had been from Eidolon Prime, the ones who sent that final message. It wasn't just duty that brought her here. It was destiny. Suddenly alarms blared through the Erebus's comm network. Lieutenant Rowe's voice came through tense. Captain, we've detected movement in orbit. Zeran signatures, 3 cruisers approaching from the far side of the planet. Mira clenched her fists. They never left. The crew scrambled as the sound of thunder rolled through the atmosphere. The cruisers descending like shadows. Blue plasma bolts lit the sky, slamming into the surface, shaking the ground beneath their feet. Get everyone back to the ship, Mira commanded, her voice cutting through the chaos. But Captain, we haven't finished the recovery. We'll finish it when they're gone, she snapped. Now move. The Erebus's guns roared to life, firing streaks of crimson light that tore through the storm clouds. The Zeran ships answered with their own fury, burning the air with molten trails. The battlefield was chaos. Lightning, dust, fire, and vengeance twisting together in the sky. As Mira's fleet pulled into formation, Aegis's voice whispered through the comms. Activation sequence complete. Vengeance protocol online. Mira's eyes widened as the AI synced across their systems, restoring long-lost combat subroutines. Old weapons hummed awake, targeting with precision impossible for modern ships. The Erebus fired again, and this time the Zeran cruiser exploded instantly, vaporized in one perfect strike. The other 2 retreated, vanishing into hyperspace, leaving trails of plasma behind. Silence returned, broken only by the wind. Kara looked at the captain, her voice quiet but filled with awe. Captain, that wasn't our firepower. Mira nodded slowly. No, it was Eidolon's. The planet below glowed faintly, energy spreading through its surface like veins of light. The old systems had awakened, recognizing the blood of those who returned. Mira watched the light rise into the sky, carrying a single code through space once again. The same ancient signal, reborn and amplified. It spread faster than light, across human space, across alien borders. Every receiver, every satellite, every mind that listened heard the same words once more. We don't beg for rescue. We promise retribution. And far away in the heart of the Zeran Dominion, a trembling voice whispered to its emperor, the humans have returned, and they brought Eidolon with them. The stars burned brighter that night, as if the galaxy itself had opened its eyes again. From the ashes of Eidolon Prime, the old signal spread like wildfire, carried by relays, colonies, and forgotten satellites. It reached every corner of human space, waking systems that had slept for centuries, and wherever it was heard, something inside humanity stirred. An instinct older than fear, older than war, on Mars. Miners stopped their drills as their consoles flickered with the words, "We promise retribution." In the outer colonies, freighters halted mid-route, their pilots watching in silence as the signal pulsed through the stars. In the deep void, old war platforms powered up for the first time in generations. Humanity's voice had returned, and it carried not sorrow, but fury wrapped in purpose aboard the Erebus. Captain Mira Hayes watched the transmission spread across the galaxy. The holographic display bloomed with thousands of red lights, each one a Terran ship responding to the call. Her crew stood speechless as long-dormant fleets began transmitting their allegiance. Names appeared on the screen, fleets that history had forgotten. The Atlas Line, Project Dawnbreaker, the Silent Armada. They were all answering one after another, Mira whispered. They were waiting for the signal all this time. Lieutenant Kara Miles stared in awe. Captain, some of these ships are over 3 centuries old. They shouldn't even function. Mira smiled faintly. Maybe not by logic, but by promise. A deep hum resonated through the Erebus as Aegis linked the fleet into a single unified network. Connection established, the AI announced. Deathworlder units online. That word, Deathworlder, sent chills through every heart that heard it. It was what the galaxy once called humanity, the species from the most dangerous world in known space, the ones who adapted, endured, and refused to die. Now that name returned not as insult but as warning. On the far side of the Orion Rift, the Zeran Dominion received fragments of the signal. Their war council gathered in panic. They're uniting, hissed the Zeran Prime strategist. Those words are not a declaration. They're a mobilization. The Emperor's scaled hands trembled as he watched the human network grow across every sector. Shut it down, jam the frequency, erase their transmission, he ordered. But his technicians shook their heads. We can't. It's not using standard communication lines. It's embedded in the gravity spectrum itself. The Emperor's eyes widened. They used the stars back aboard Erebus, the tactical display filled with incoming requests. Human admirals from old colonies reported in, fleets forming under a single banner for the first time in centuries. Admiral Rowan Dre appeared on a secure channel. His voice rough but proud. Captain Hayes, you've done what the Council never could. You gave humanity a reason to stand again. Mira nodded. We're not done yet, Admiral. Eidolon's vengeance is just the beginning. Dre hesitated, then smiled faintly. I'll make sure the Council stays blind long enough for you to finish this. Thank you, Mira replied. And Admiral, if we don't make it back, you will, he interrupted. Because you carry the promise they couldn't keep. Moments later, the Erebus fleet broke orbit, joined by dozens of ships emerging from hyperspace, some new, some ancient. The void filled with light as the human armada took shape, each ship bearing the emblem of Earth and the mark of Eidolon. Mira stood at the bridge window watching it all come together. Her voice was calm, steady, and filled with quiet fire. Transmit to all ships, she said. Message follows. Kara nodded and opened the channel. This is Captain Mira Hayes of the United Terran Fleet, Mira said, her voice echoing through every speaker in human space. 200 years ago, our people died believing we would return. Today we fulfill that promise when from this moment, humanity stands as one, not in fear, but in memory, not in silence, but in retribution. Deathworlders, prepare for war. The transmission ended, but its echo lingered like thunder across the stars. Crew members whispered the words to each other as if they were sacred. Deathworlders, prepare for war. It spread faster than any command, more powerful than any law. Humanity had become one pulse, one will, one storm ready to break the silence of centuries. On the outer rim, alien outposts began shutting down their trade routes. Merchants whispered of Terran fleets rising from black space, of ships that moved like ghosts through the void. Some claimed to see the Erebus itself, cloaked in shadow leading the armada of vengeance. And in every dark corner of the galaxy, fear began to grow, not from what humanity had done, but from what it was about to do. Mira stood in her command chair, eyes fixed on the endless stars ahead. Kara approached quietly. Captain, where do we strike first? Mira's gaze hardened. Where it all began, she said. The Zeran home sector. The crew fell silent, understanding the weight of those words. It wasn't just a battle. It was the answer to a promise made across time. As the fleet entered hyperspace, the stars blurred into rivers of light. Every ship carried the same emblem, the same vow, the same echo of Eidolon's last words. We don't beg for rescue. We promise retribution. And for the first time in centuries, the galaxy remembered what it truly meant to face the Deathworlders. Far across the void, deep inside the shining spires of the Zeran Dominion, the air was thick with unease. For centuries, they had ruled the stars without question, their fleets vast, their science unmatched, but now, whispers spread through every level of their empire. Whispers of a returning storm. A single signal, old and human, had undone the peace of entire sectors. The Emperor of Zera, Vicarian 9, sat upon his throne of crystal and flame. Surrounded by trembling advisors, holoscreens floated around him, displaying maps of space where red marks, human fleets multiplied by the hour. "This is impossible," hissed General Kratesh, his armor clicking as he spoke. The humans were broken, scattered, extinct. The Emperor's voice was low but carried the cold weight of fear. "Extinction is permanent, General. This is resurrection." A younger officer ran into the chamber, bowing low, his scales shimmering with panic. "Your Excellency, we've lost contact with 7 border worlds." They were hit simultaneously. Vakarian rose from his throne, his golden eyes narrowing. "By how many ships?" The officer swallowed. "Unknown, sir. No ships were detected before the attacks. The colonies simply went dark." A murmur rippled through the council. "They are using old Deathworlder tactics," muttered Kratesh, remembering the ancient wars, silent strikes, ghost fleets, precision over power. The Emperor turned toward the projection of the human armada. "Find their leader," he said. "Who commands this?" "Resurrection." The intelligence minister trembled. "Her name appears in the intercepts. Mira Hayes." The Emperor's claws tightened around his scepter. "Then tell your fleets this name will be erased, as we erased her ancestors." But even as his words echoed through the hall, the lights above flickered. The Dominion's central AI began flashing warnings. Data corruption. Unknown signal interference. The Emperor looked up sharply. "What now?" The holograms twisted, and for a moment, a human symbol appeared across every display. The emblem of Eidolon Prime. A single voice, calm and human, spoke through their systems. "Eidolon remembers." The council chamber fell silent. Kratesh whispered, "They're inside our network." The Emperor slammed his staff to the ground. "Purge it. Disconnect everything." But it was too late. Across the Dominion, ships malfunctioned, engines froze. Targeting systems turned against their own vessels. Entire fleets drifted helplessly in the dark, paralyzed by the resurrected AI known as Aegis. Humanity hadn't just returned with ships. They had returned with intelligence older than the Dominion itself. Meanwhile, in the heart of the Erebus, Mira Hayes watched the data feed stream in. Her eyes were steady, her voice calm. "Report," she said. Kara looked up from the console. "Ziran fleets are collapsing across 3 sectors. Their own systems are fighting them." Mira nodded. "Good. Less killing, more justice." She turned toward the window, watching as human fleets advanced through the rift like a tide of light. Lieutenant Rowe approached, hesitant. "Captain." "The council back on Earth. They're demanding communication." Mira smiled faintly. "Tell them they can talk after the promise is kept." Her crew exchanged glances, proud, afraid, but loyal beyond measure. Across space, human ships moved like shadows, not conquering but cleansing. Each destroyed Ziran fortress revealed archives of atrocities, records of how entire human colonies were erased. Every discovery fueled the fire, uniting humanity further. For every name on those lists, a ship was named for every destroyed colony. A vow was renewed on the Dominion homeworld. Panic turned to revolt. Civilians fled the shining cities. Soldiers muttered that their leaders had angered something eternal. The old priests whispered prophecies, that one day the children of the death world would return from their graves to reclaim the stars. And now, prophecy had become reality. The Emperor stood at his balcony watching smoke rise from his once perfect capital. He whispered to himself, "They are not fighting for conquest." Kratesh looked up. "Then what drives them?" Vakarion's voice broke into a whisper. "A promise." Aboard the Erebus, Mira received a transmission. The face of the Emperor appeared. "Proud but desperate, human," he said. "You have proven your strength. The Dominion seeks peace." Mira leaned forward, her eyes cold and clear. "Peace?" she said. "You burned it 2 centuries ago," he growled. "You will destroy everything, even yourselves," she answered softly. Better that than silence. Before the link could close, Mira replayed the old signal through the Dominion's channels. The ancient voice of Eidolon's last survivor filled their airwaves, echoing through every speaker. "We don't beg for rescue. We promise retribution." Then she whispered one final word. "Delivered." Moments later, the Erebus fleet began its descent into the Ziran system. The skies glowed red as the Dominion's defenses crumbled. But Mira's fleet didn't bomb cities, didn't slaughter civilians. They shut down weapons, freed prisoners, and broadcast every truth the Dominion had hidden. The Empire was not destroyed by fire. It was destroyed by the truth it feared. As dawn rose over the burning world, Mira stood at her command window. Kara approached quietly. "It's over." "Captain," Mira shook her head. "Not yet. We promised more than retribution. We promised remembrance." She looked out toward the dying world, her voice soft but filled with steel. "They will remember Eidolon, and far away. Across the stars, humans watched the fall of the Dominion, not with cheers of victory but with silent pride. The promise had been kept, and the galaxy finally knew the price of underestimating humanity. The Deathworlders had returned, and they had taught the stars to fear again. The galaxy had seen wars before, but never like this. It wasn't chaos. It wasn't conquest. It was judgment moving through the stars. Humanity's fleets didn't march with pride, they moved with purpose. Every formation precise, every strike silent. Every act measured by memory, not hate. From the black core of the Erebus, Captain Mira Hayes watched the storm unfold outside her window. Thousands of Terran ships glided through the dark like a tide of burning suns. Each ship carried the mark of Eidolon Prime upon its hull, a broken circle wrapped in fire, the symbol of those who died, now painted on every vessel that lived. Aegis, the awakened AI, spoke through the intercom with a calm metallic tone. "All fleets report synchronization, energy reserves at 94%. The Deathworlders stand ready," Mira nodded, her eyes fixed on the Ziran core sector map. "Execute Wrath Protocol," she said. The AI paused for a moment, then replied, "Confirmed. The promise will now be fulfilled." Across the stars, massive engines roared to life, bending gravity. Old war stations, long hidden under moons and black nebulae, powered on for the first time in centuries. The galaxy trembled as Earth's superweapons, thought lost to time, came online once more. But these were not weapons of destruction. They were shields and beams of containment designed to end war, not feed it. The first strike came not as an explosion, but as silence. The Ziran High Fleet vanished from sensors, not destroyed, disabled. Their ships drifted powerless, their weapons useless. Their systems turned against them. Across dozens of worlds, human forces cut through defense grids, dismantling centuries of tyranny in hours. Kara watched from her console in awe. "Captain, they're surrendering without a fight," Mira answered softly. "Good. Maybe they finally understand." The bridge crew stared at her, feeling the weight of what she meant. This wasn't vengeance, and it was a reckoning written in discipline, not rage. Meanwhile, the Ziran Emperor Vicarian 9 stood within his collapsing palace. The sky above burned red as Terran ships hovered silently over his city. He looked up at them, voice shaking. "So this is how death comes, in silence." Then the air shimmered, and a transmission formed before him. Captain Mira's face appeared, calm and steady, her uniform bearing no medals, no glory, only the symbol of Eidolon. "You sought to erase us," she said quietly. "But all you did was give us something to remember." The Emperor's claws trembled. "You've destroyed an empire, human, and for what? To prove a point?" Mira's voice carried no hatred, only certainty. "To prove that memory is stronger than fear." Outside, human fleets spread across the Dominion, activating Aegis beacons on liberated worlds. Each beacon pulsed with a low, deep tone, the voice of the ancient AI, announcing the return of Terran law. Hostilities ceased, justice enacted, restoration in progress. For the first time in living memory, the galaxy began to stabilize under human control, not domination but protection. Still, deep within Mira's mind, there was unrest. She stood on the command deck, staring at the endless stars. "What happens when Wrath ends?" Kara asked softly beside her. Mira looked at her with tired eyes. "Then we start something harder." "What's that?" "Peace," she whispered. Suddenly, alarms flashed red. Multiple hyperspace breaches detected near the edge of the system. Aegis spoke instantly. "New contacts, unidentified signatures." "Non-Ziran origin." The crew tensed, expecting another threat, but as the new ships appeared, the scanners confirmed the impossible. They were human, yet not old colony ships lost before the Ziran Wars. Fleets from exiled human worlds returning to join the cause. The forgotten had returned to the fire. Drawn by the same promise, Mira smiled faintly.
"Even the lost remember," she said. The newcomers broadcast a single message across all frequencies.
"For Eidolon," every Terran ship replied in unison. their engines pulsing in rhythm like one great heartbeat. For Eidolon, they echoed, shaking the stars themselves. The Emperor watched from his ruined city as the skies filled with Terran light. He whispered, "You were never conquerors." Mira's voice came through the comm, soft but final. "No," she said. "We were survivors." As the Erebus drifted above the now silent world, the fleet's lights dimmed. The war was over, the promise fulfilled, but the galaxy knew it would never be the same. The Deathworlders had shown mercy where none was expected, strength where none was believed. They had returned not as monsters, but as the proof of humanity's unbroken will, far beyond the core. Distant civilizations listened to the stories of a forgotten world, of a silent signal, of a species that refused to vanish. And in the deep night between stars, every voice that once mocked humanity now spoke its name with respect and fear. The Deathworlders had awakened, and the galaxy had learned its lesson. Retribution was not just destruction, it was memory preserved by fire. On the bridge of the Erebus, Mira turned toward the stars, whispering a final vow. "Rest now, Eidolon. Your promise is kept." The light of her fleet shimmered in the void like dawn breaking across the universe. And as the last echoes of the signal faded, one truth remained. Humanity had changed the stars forever. The war ended not with thunder, but with a silence so deep it touched every corner of the stars. For the first time in centuries, no distress calls echoed across human space. No fleets burned through the night. The signal that had once promised retribution now drifted gently through the void. Slower, softer, peaceful, its purpose fulfilled. Its words remembered. The Erebus floated above the ruins of Eidolon Prime once more. But the planet below no longer glowed red from fire. It glowed from life. Cities rose again where craters once yawned open. Forests grew over the old scars, and rivers ran clear for the first time since the war. Captain Mira Hayes stood on the restored surface, boots pressing into soil that had not felt human footsteps for 200 years. Around her, engineers, scientists, and colonists worked side by side. They were not soldiers anymore. They were builders, healers, teachers. Every brick they placed, every field they planted carried the same silent oath. Never again. Kara Miles approached, holding a small data crystal, her voice quiet. "Captain, Aegis has finished cataloging the old Eidolon archives." Mira smiled faintly. Taking it in her gloved hand, inside the crystal were the last voices of the colony, the ones who had sent the final message. She inserted it into her wrist console, and the hologram appeared before them, the same scientist they had seen months ago, her recorded words still clear, still strong. "If you hear this, then you are our future, and we are proud of you." The crowd nearby stopped to watch. Their tools lowering as they listened, the hologram continued. "We wanted to build a world where humanity remembered its strength, not its fear. If our death gave you that memory, then it was worth everything." Mira stood still, her eyes reflecting the light of the recording. For once she didn't speak, she only listened, letting the silence say what words could not. When the hologram ended, Kara wiped her eyes. "Do you think they'd be proud of us?" she whispered. Mira looked at the horizon where the sun rose over the rebuilt capital. "Yes," she said softly, "because we didn't avenge them with hate. We honored them with endurance later." In orbit, the Erebus served not as a warship, but as a memorial. Its hull was inscribed with the names of every lost colony and every ship that had fallen during the Great Silence. Visitors from across the galaxy came to see it. Humans, aliens, even Zeran citizens who sought forgiveness. Mira greeted them all with the same quiet dignity. "We fought because you taught us fear," she told the Zeran delegation. "Now learn strength through peace." And for the first time in history, the former enemies bowed before humanity. Not out of submission, but out of understanding, on Earth. The Terran High Council finally broadcast its message. "The promise has been kept," they declared. "No longer shall we be defined by what was taken from us, but by what we rebuild together." The word spread through the colonies, carried on the same network that once spread war, and wherever they were heard, people looked up at the stars with pride instead of fear. Months later, Mira walked through the streets of the new Eidolon city. Children played under holographic banners that read, "Eidolon Lives." Statues of the first colonists stood near the gates, each one facing outward toward the stars, watching, guarding, remembering. She stopped by the central plaza where an eternal flame burned beneath glass. There, engraved in steel, were the words that had changed the galaxy. "We don't beg for rescue. We promise retribution," and beneath them, Mira had added a single new line, "and we promise peace that night." Mira stood at the edge of the rebuilt tower overlooking the valley. The wind brushed through her hair, warm and alive. She opened her communicator and spoke quietly to Aegis. "Are the beacons still active?" "Yes, Captain," the AI answered, its tone softer now, almost human. "Every system still repeats the signal, but its meaning has changed." Mira smiled faintly. "Good, let them hear it, not as a warning, but as a song." Above her, the night sky shimmered with countless ships returning home. Some were new, some ancient, all bearing the mark of unity. No longer were they called fleets of retribution. Now they were known as the Guardians of Eidolon. As dawn touched the mountains, Kara joined her, holding 2 mugs of steaming coffee. "Hard to believe it's over," she said quietly. Mira looked at her, smiling. "It's never over, Kara. Peace is just another kind of promise. One we must keep every day." They stood together as sunlight poured across the new world. The same sun that had once witnessed destruction now watched rebirth. And somewhere, drifting through the galaxy, the old signal still traveled, not as a cry for vengeance, but as a whisper of strength, carrying the memory of those who kept their word, reminding every world, every species, every future listener that humanity was never weak. They were the children of the death world, the keepers of promises, the builders of tomorrow. As the final light of day touched the horizon, Mira closed her eyes and whispered one last time, "Eidolon, rest now. Your children have come home." The wind carried her words across the valley, through the cities, and up into the sky, and the galaxy listened, silent and humbled, for the promise was not only kept, and it was reborn forever.